This is the introductory lecture to social sciences. This introductory lecture, I would like to begin by reading some passages from the book Hay Ibn Yaqsan, whose English translation is Alive, Son of Awake. It's a philosophical novel by an Andalusian philosopher named Ibn Tufayl, which narrates the story of a child who happens to grow up on an isolated island all by himself. And the book narrates his reflections and observations on himself as well as the world till he reaches enlightenment. In the following passage that I'm going to read, Hay observes himself in relation to other animals and draws a very beautiful picture of man. So here goes the passage. By this time, he began to have the ideas of great many things fixed in his mind, so as to have a desire for some and an aversion to others, even when they were absent. In the meanwhile, he considered all the several sorts of animals, and saw that they were all clothed either with hair, wool, or feather. He considered their great swiftness and strength, and they were all armed with weapons defensive as horns, teeth, hoops, spurs, and nails, but that he himself was naked and defenseless, slow and weak in respect of them. For whenever there happened any controversy about gathering of fruits, he always came off by the worst, for they could keep both their own and take away his, and he could neither beat them off nor run away from them. So Hay observes that in contrast to himself, all other animals were covered with some sort of thing like hair, wool, or feathers, and they were all armed with weapons, defensive weapons like horns, teeth, hoofs, spurs, and nails, while he himself was naked, and he saw himself as being the weakest of all. And he further observes that whenever he was struggling for fruits and other things, the animals came better off. Moving further, he observed beside that his fellow fawns, though their foreheads were smooth at first, yet afterwards had horns bud out, and though they were feeble at first, yet afterwards grew very vigorous and swift. All these things he perceived in them, and which were not in himself. And when he considered the matter, he could not imagine what should be the reason of this difference. Then he considered such animals as had any defect or natural imperfection, but amongst them all he could find none like himself. He took notice that the passages of the excrement were protected in all other creatures besides himself, that by which they voided their grosser excrements with a tail, and that we search for the voiding of the urine with hair or some such like thing. Besides, he observed that their genital organs were more considered than his own were. Other than that, Hay observes that the fellow fawns, the little babies of other animals, though at first their foreheads were smooth, but soon their horns budded out from their heads, and they soon began to become very strong and vigorous and swift. But when he observed himself, he found that that he had none of these blessings of the nature. and this caused him a great deal of agony. Moreover, he observed that the passages of the other animals from which they voided, though they excreted their urine or stool, was either covered with tail or with some hair, and that the genital organs in other animals was more concealed than his own. All these things were matter of great grief to him, and when he had perplexed himself very much with the thoughts of them, and was now near 7 years old, he despaired utterly of having those things grow upon him, the want of which made him so uneasy. He therefore got him some broad leaves of trees, of which he made two coverings, one to wear behind, the other before, and made a girdle of palm leaves and rushes to hang his coverings upon, and tied about his waist. But alas, it would not last long, for the leaves withered and dropped away, so that he was forced to get more, which he plaited in layers one upon another, which made it a little more durable, but not much. Then, having broke branches from a tree and fitted the ends of them to his mind, he stripped off the twigs and made them smooth. With these he began to attack the wild beasts, assaulting the weaker, and defending himself against the stronger. By this means he began a little to know his own powers, and perceived that his hands were better than their forefeet, because by the help of them he had provided wherewithal to cover his nakedness, and also gotten him a defensive weapon, so that now he had no need of a tail, nor of those natural weapons which he had so wished for at first. When he is reflecting upon these shortcomings in his own self, he begins to cover himself, his private parts, with broad leaves of trees. One to wear behind himself, and other to cover before him. And also he made a girdle of palm leaves and rushes around his waist to hang his coverings upon. Then he takes some branches or boughs from trees, and he strips off the twigs to make weapons to attack wild beasts and to defend himself. So now Hai is beginning to realize his own powers and thinks that his hands are better than their forefeet, that his hands are so much better than their what nature has bestowed upon other animals, like their defensive weapons, like horns and trees. So in these passages, Hai makes a very good and beautiful picture of man. Unlike other animals, we human beings have the capacity, even though we might be the weakest of all, we have the capacity to become the strongest of all. We can increase our powers manifold. From that concludes the part 1 of the introductory lecture, and now we can move to the part 2. Where we will discuss the gregarious nature of man. If we observe the animals around us, the animals can be divided into two types. Those who are found to live in groups and are hence gregarious in nature, and those who live alone by themselves. Man too is a gregarious animal, which means he lives in groups like ants, bees, and various other creatures. Now the question is, why is man a social animal? To make this point clear, we can take the example of a very simple thing as a pencil. And we can ask the question, can a single man be able to make this pencil? The pencil is made of wood. It has a lead, and it is colored by, this pencil like is colored in blue paint. So the tree, the wood is taken from the tree, and to bring down the tree, we need an axe, and the head of the axe is made of iron, and the iron is to be found is buried into the earth in the form of ores. Can a single man dig out the ore from the earth and then refine it and then melt it and then mold it into the shape of the iron blade? The answer would be unequivocal no. And the same thing goes for other things like lead, which too is be found buried into the earth in the form of an ore. And the paint. If a simple thing like a pencil is impossible for a single man to do, imagine the other more difficult things that man has to undertake. So this example clearly illustrates the social nature of man. That is why some 2500 years ago, Aristotle, in his book Politics, says the following: man is by nature a social animal. An individual who is unsocial naturally and not accidentally is either beneath our notice or more than human. So society is something that precedes the individual. Anyone who either cannot lead the common life or is so self-sufficient as not to need to, and therefore does not partake of society, is either a beast or a god. With this, we now begin the last and third part of this introductory lecture. Where we will discuss the need and make a case for why social sciences are important. As human beings, we confront the world. The world that we confront, we can further divide into two types: the the social world, and the physical world. The social world is something that is studied by social scientists, while as the physical world is something that is studied by scientists and comes under the natural sciences. And the social world is studied under the social sciences. In a world where we are fascinated by the wonders of science, like the invention of bulbs, cars, aeroplanes, and whatnot, all the breakthroughs in medicine which has made it possible for us to cure the diseases that hitherto were incurable. The role of social sciences is something that is overlooked. So to make a case for social sciences, I would give you a very simple example to explain why we need to take social sciences seriously. It begins to rain. Rain. And rain is a natural phenomenon. A phenomena that is studied under natural phenomena that is studied under natural sciences. And the rain falls over a stream. Over a stream. Over a stream. Two people are outside their homes, and then rain just comes down from the sky suddenly, and the two people go to a shop to buy an umbrella. The shop only has one umbrella in stock, and he has priced the umbrella for about rupees 1,000, and there are no other shops nearby that sell umbrellas. One person is able to afford the umbrella while the other doesn't. One person goes back to his home dry without any drop of rain on his clothes, while the other person who isn't able to afford it goes back to home drenched to his skin, and when he reaches the home he falls ill and has to then go to a doctor to for a checkup. What this example shows is that while we confront the same world, like we confront the same phenomena like the rain, how the rain will affect us will depend on how the society functions. It won't have its impact, its impact won't be uniform on all the people. How it will impact us will depend on how the society functions. That concludes much of the introductory lecture to the introduction to social sciences. Now I would like to read some questions that you can ponder and reflect upon, that will make you both intrigued as well as curious about the social sciences. The first question to ponder over is, ask yourself, what affects you more, the social world or the physical world? Another question, a society can choose to do research on how to make good weapons than how to cure diseases more efficiently. With this example in mind, can you think about what relationship does science has with how society functions? And the third and last question, if we have a society where people work and eat unhealthily and live a stressful life, what impact would it have on the healthcare system? Is health simply a question of how well the healthcare system is? Or is there a relationship between health and society too? Thanks for listening to this lecture.